Today's meeting will be recorded. The recording and meeting presentation will be posted to the Vision Zero website, along with all other Vision Zero related materials, including meeting minutes and upcoming meeting schedules. All panelists will be responsible to mute themselves until they speak. Due to FOIA and public access laws, please refrain from using the chat feature for anything other than our ability to coordinate and help speakers who need assistance using Zoom. The question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane will be used for public comment. Please refrain from entering public comments into the Q&A field until the public comment portion of the meeting takes place. Public comment will take place at the end of the meeting, and participants can raise their virtual hand to signify a desire to speak and wait to be recognized. To do so, you may open the participant pane and click raise hand at the bottom of the panel. Participants may also utilize the question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane. In-person comments will be prioritized ahead of those into the Q&A field. And with that, I would like to go ahead and turn the meeting over to our council chair, Commissioner Garrett Ugalito.
Thank you, Aaron. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on June 6th. So I guess we didn't really look at the schedule ahead of time when we scheduled these out for the rest of 2023 and completely missed the legislative schedule in our scheduling this, which tomorrow is CNADA, the last day of the legislative session. So it is going to be a nice break to be able to be here with all of you today to talk about safety on our roadways. So I will start by telling my fellow council members, given it is the legislative last 2 days of legislative session, if I do receive a phone call or a text that I need to go up there in the middle of this meeting, I have my trusty Bureau Chief of Policy and Planning, Kim Lassay, who will step in as the DOT representative for the rest of the meeting. So today we have a great agenda. I'm really excited that we're going to do a few things. One, get a legislative update from both our DOT legislative program manager in CLESA, as well as hear from other state agencies about any safety related initiatives that are going on at the legislature this year for them. Then we're going to be able to introduce a great new teammate here at ConnDOT to talk about a new program where we are restarting the Safe Routes to School program. Really excited we have a great new team member here at ConnDOT who is going to really take that and run with it and build that program statewide. And then we're going to hear from our various subcommittees, what's been going on with our 4 subcommittees, and it'll be a good opportunity for us as council members to talk to them about what we're hoping that they will do for the remainder of 2023. So it'll be a good opportunity for us as council members to have that back and forth with the subcommittee chairs who are doing a lot of work with their subcommittees, in between our quarterly council meetings. So with that, I also want to welcome, we have a new council member, Lieutenant Menzalillo from State Police has been promoted. So we have Lieutenant Mark DeCoco, who is the new council member representing DESP, Connecticut State Police. So he previously was the chair or co-chair of the enforcement subcommittee. And so he's already been actively involved in the Vision Zero Council's work. So I really want to thank Lieutenant DeCoco for joining us on the council, and thank now Captain Manzalillo for all of his hard work over the past couple of years and focusing on roadway safety. So with that, I'm going to move to the next agenda item, where we have the adoption of the meeting minutes from March 7th. These were previously sent out to council members. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. Lieutenant Coco moved, and I didn't hear who seconded.
Eileen McMurray.
Oh, hi, Eileen. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye. Any objections or abstentions? No. Okay. Thank you. So took care of that administrative function. So next, we're going to move on to legislative update. We're going to start with Ann Kleza, who's going to talk about the DOT bills as well as the Vision Zero package. And then we'll move on to our colleagues from the other state agencies to give any updates. So Ann, are you there?
I'm here, Commissioner.
Okay. You got some sleep last night, Ann?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you. So as many of you know, House Bill 5917, an act implementing the recommendations of the Vision Zero Council, has passed the House. It is currently awaiting votes in the Senate. There's only 2 days left, as the commissioner said. So, we're still pushing hard to get it passed. There is support. The House passed it in a pretty close bipartisan manner. So, with that, I'll just go through the bill a little bit. Section 1 requires DOT to study the Idaho stop. Section 2 is having DOT adopt and revise intersection control evaluation policy when we are evaluating new and existing intersections. Section 3, it requires DOT to award an exemplary Vision Zero program to local and regional boards of education. And 4 allows certain officials to require people, when they contest infractions or violations, to attend a driving safety course before they resolve the ticket. Next slide, please. Garrett, can I do the slides or?
Oh, it moved on our side.
Oh, okay,
I got-
now
I
it
got
moved,
you.
okay. Section 5 through 7 requires DMV to develop a safety video to have people watch it every time they renew or transfer a license from a different jurisdiction. And Section 8 requires DOT to conduct a public awareness campaign for driving under the influence of certain over-the-counter drugs with an emphasis on opioid use and cannabis use. And Section 9 requires DOT, when we develop our 5-year capital plan, to examine proposals from the Vision Zero's Council Equities Subcommittee. And 15 requires DOT to establish a program to promote seatbelt use among vulnerable communities. Next slide. And so sections 10 through 14 and 16 through 18 are the automated enforcement, which has been one of the biggest problems people have had with the bill. But we've really worked with a lot of different stakeholders, and the chairs of the committee have listened to a lot of different voices, and they came up with a really good plan. So DOT needs to develop guidelines for municipalities when they want speed cameras or red light cameras. And before submitting a plan to DOT, municipalities need to hold a vote. First hold a public hearing, and then they need to get it voted on by their town's legislative body. And then every 3 years, they need to reapply to DOT for those cameras. And DOT needs to then evaluate, has it reduced crashes, what the data looks like. We're allowed to collect certain data. And so if DOT thinks that those cameras should no longer be in that vicinity or they should be changed, it allows DOT to work with that municipality to either remove those cameras or move them somewhere else. Next slide. Then there is House Bill 6746. It passed the House and the Senate unanimously, and it expands DOT's countermeasures for wrong way driving. So we currently are putting up all our detections and flashing lights. The bill requires us to do 120 highway exit ramps that DOT deems as high risk. And then it establishes a pilot program for DOT to test VMS signs and to alert right way drivers that a wrong way driver is coming. And lastly, it gives a grant to UConn to study directional rumble strips to alert a driver when they're driving the wrong way on our entry ramps. And the last bill about safety is our DOT aircraft carrier. This has passed the Senate, but it has not passed the House. And so there's a couple sections here relating to safety. The first two sections allow symbols now for pedestrian control signals to now allow someone to, it will show someone that they're raising their hand. It won't just say walk, so that it's more visually inclusive. And section 5 requires UConn to have training for local traffic authorities, and the UConn will have training 3 times per year, but the local traffic authority just has to go one time per year. Section 6 allows OSTA to set speeds up to 65 miles per hour. Currently, we can only do 65, so now we could do 60. And lastly, sections 14 and 15 increase the fine for driving commercial vehicles driving on the parkway to $500 for a first offense and $1,000 for a subsequent offense. And I think that is it for, last one is 1082, which an act implementing the recommendations of DOT regarding a reduction in the blood alcohol limit for impaired driving and boating. This bill got a public hearing in the Transportation Committee, and there was also MAD and NTSB had an advocacy day at the Capitol. It was very well received. It was a really good event, but unfortunately the bill is still on the Senate calendar and has not been voted on. And I think that is the end for legislative update.
Thanks, Ann. So before we go on to other agencies, any council members have questions for Ann on any of those pieces of legislation?
There were some questions in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I answered the one. So it
Okay.
is every other renewal in section 5. So. Okay, no questions on those bills. So I'll turn it over to council members. Maybe is anyone from DMV on? I see Jim is on. I know he's been spending a lot of time up there. I don't know, Jim, if you have any updates on any of your legislation. So.
Yeah, I certainly can, Commissioner. Good morning and good morning, everyone. Thanks so much. And that was a great overview of some of the things that have taken place so far this year. And mentioned in the Vision Zero Council bill about the videos, and Commissioner, thank you for taking that question in the chat that I would have mentioned as I got up. There is a DMV component in the wrong way driving bill as well. It speaks a little bit to driver education and talking a little bit about wrong way driving prevention, maybe how to handle a situation like that. So the expectation is that that will be part of some of the education work that goes on in driver schools. Aside from that, I'd mention the DMV agency bill, our aircraft carrier, which had many provisions that were pretty much operational, but a couple worth mentioning. There is going to be a cannabis component to safe driving courses that will be introduced. The thought is a video that will be shown as part of the drug and alcohol component of that 8-hour course. That is in the bill and will take place. There was also a little bit or a couple of provisions that were folded into the agency bill about school buses and school bus driving. There was some language about the use of GPS on school buses, and that any device that is used by drivers needs to be secure, obviously for safety purposes. It also asks DMV to look a little bit into the bus driver shortage as well. There are a couple of other quick provisions I would just mention. There is something about open recalls for vehicles that go in for repairs, or that visit emission statements. If there is an open recall on that video or on that motor vehicle, they are expected to get information. The customer is expected to get information on it so they could follow up on it. I think that does have a safety component. There was also a provision about the move over law that I did see that I have to read a little bit more about, but there was an update to that existing law as well that ended up being a part of the DMV bill. I think overall, for our purposes and for the discussion today, I think that's most of what I saw.
Great, thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Any other council members want to provide an update? I don't know if Des or Chief State's Attorneys have anything. I know that there's been a lot of issues. There are some related bills moving forward related to traffic stops or street takeovers, pieces like that. I don't know if Lieutenant DeCoco, you have any information on those at this point. Oh, you're muted, Lieutenant.
Everything preliminary at this point, nothing to discuss with the council this time.
And I think Jackie is on. I don't know if I admittedly have not been paying attention to other committees this session. I don't know if the Chief State's Attorney's Office has bills moving forward this session dealing with anything safety on the roadways.
Thanks, Garrett. So nothing directly from DCJ that is traffic safety focused. But as you mentioned, there are a couple of related bills that DCJ has weighed in on, including topics like secondary violations. There's also clean slate and the impact that that's having on DUI convictions in the state and subsequent offenders. So those are topics that DCJ has weighed in on, but no bill proposed that's centered on traffic safety.
Okay, thanks. Then I don't know, ADS, DPH, OEC. I don't know if you have anything you want to bring up.
Thank you, Garrett. This is Eileen from OEC. We do not at this time have anything currently pending at the legislature specifically related to Vision Zero activities and objectives. But I will say that having traveled out of state to neighboring states, Rhode Island and Massachusetts, I was pleased to see signs posted that indicate that speed limit traffic laws are photo enforced, for instance. So we're in good company. But thank you, nothing from OEC at this time.
Thanks, Eileen.
Good morning. Is it in your
Oh, Susan, you're cutting out there.
Is traveling, so I do not have update. I'm in for Susan Logan. She's traveling this morning, and I have no updates to share at this time.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Okay. Great. So thank you everyone for those updates. We'll know more after the next 48 hours. What proceeds. Okay, so we will move on to the next agenda item. Each quarterly meeting, we'd like to have a presentation from an outside party to talk about a program or initiative or some research. So this quarter, we wanted to get one of our newest teammates here at Condot, Kristen Levesque, to talk about the Safe Routes to School program. Kristen, we posted this position when we got permission after the infrastructure bill passed, where it revitalized the Safe Routes to School program, which is a national effort. And we're really excited to have her on board. She has hit the ground running. She has great experience, both as an educator and as an engineer. So she's a perfect fit for this. So Kristen, I'm going to turn it over to you to present to everyone on what you are thinking and where we're going.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Ucalito. As you mentioned, my name is Kristen Levesque. I'm a transportation engineer here in the project coordination unit working for Craig Babowitz. And I do have background in transportation engineering, both here at the DOT as well as in Boston, Massachusetts. Planning experience in Somerville, Mass, and education experience as a teacher in Connecticut, both in mathematics as well as special education, including program management in life skills and transition. So again, thank you for the introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell everyone about the Safe Routes to School program today. So next slide. You may wonder why a Safe Routes to School program is relevant to the work being done by the Vision Zero Council. But when we look closely at the goals of each, we can see that Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School are actually partners in safety. So while Safe Routes to School at the Connecticut DOT focuses on making it safer, more accessible, and more sustainable for students to walk and bike to school, Vision Zero works to eliminate all traffic deaths and serious injuries. So some questions to be thinking about today would be, why should these programs work together? How can Vision Zero efforts help to move Safe Routes to School programs to prioritize the areas with greatest safety needs? And what opportunities are there for Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero to collaborate? So today's presentation will talk about the background of the Safe Routes to School program, some programs and projects, as well as alignment with Vision Zero. The purpose of the Safe Routes to School program aligns with our current Department of Transportation long-range goals of safety, accessibility, and sustainability. By making active transportation safer and more accessible, all children, regardless of socioeconomic status or ability, will be given the opportunity to walk or bicycle or roll to school. Sustainability can be provided both economically and environmentally through increased activity and decreased traffic, fuel consumption, and air pollution. Support for Safe Routes to School is needed in order to implement programs and projects to increase walking and bicycling to school. By taking a look at the data just from 1969 to 2009, one can see a dramatic decline in walking, bicycling to school as compared with arrival dismissal with the family vehicle. Although more recent data may provide some fluctuations to these numbers, the overall picture shows that this continued decline indicates the majority of students who are not bused or not using public transit are being driven to school instead of walking or biking. The Safe Routes Partnership research indicates that increased walking and bicycling to school results in healthier and safer students, reduced traffic congestion. For attendance, reduced student absences and tardiness, cleaner air, and improved academic performance. Our framework is known as the 6 E's, and this is how we implement the Safe Routes to School programs and projects. Equity is our overarching measure and drives the goals of the program and projects. This framework has been expanded to include this 6th E of equity. Our own state of Connecticut commitments to transportation equity and environmental justice are also part of this equity initiative. We're examining best practices in this area both nationally through the Safe Routes Partnership, as well as in other states. And these best practices include identifying and prioritizing programs and projects to be able to account for the needs of all students. Under the new legislation, efforts to include all students expanded the program to K through 12. So now students in high schools as well as tribal agencies are included. Education and, if you can go back one, I'll just go through the framework, the 6 E's briefly, and then we can talk a little bit more about the programs and projects. The education and outreach, right now we're working on bicycle and pedestrian safety education in the schools. Encouragement, we have events and activities. We recently had our walk, bike, and roll to school day, as well as bring your child to work day. We were able to do some events and outreach through there. Evaluation is both technical assistance on the non-infrastructure side, as well as lessons learned through documentation and alignment with transportation plans and policies on the infrastructure side. Enforcement, we're looking at programmatic safety projects like speed and school zones. And engineering are both improvements to the built environment that include sidewalks and pathways, those larger infrastructure projects, as well as quick build projects. But the 6 E's provide for a comprehensive approach to both non-infrastructure programs as well as infrastructure projects. The legislation that allows for our program, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 reauthorized the Safe Routes to School under Chapter 2 of Title 23 of the U.S. Code, Section 208. And it identified the vicinity of schools, meaning within a 2-mile area, and it was expanded to include high schools and tribal areas. The map here shows the areas of the state that are within the vicinity of schools. That 2-mile area as a buffer zone is shown in blue, and you can see it's a large portion of the state that's covered by the vicinity of schools. Safe Routes to School is unique in that it covers both infrastructure and non-infrastructure components. For infrastructure, I'd like to call your attention to these components of the legislation in order to provide for projects that will substantially improve the routes to school. Both programmatic safety projects as well as infrastructure improvements to the built environment are needed. Under the law, these include sidewalks, traffic calming and speed reduction improvements, pedestrian and bicycle crossing improvements, on and off street bicycle and pedestrian facilities, secure bicycle parking, bike racks, traffic diversion improvements. The non-infrastructure examples that I want to be able to bring to your attention in the Safe Routes to School program include increasing public awareness and outreach, providing for traffic education and enforcement, providing student sessions for bicycling and pedestrian safety, and funding for staffing of the program. Funding for this program is provided under a variety of sources. Current efforts to fund both the non-infrastructure and infrastructure portions of the program are underway at this time. A little bit about our programs. As I mentioned, equity. We've updated the framework, updated our website to include accessibility, as well as created a registration for all to indicate their interest and needs in the program. We have 11 official registrations to date, and expansion of the program has allowed us to include K through 12 tribal agencies and all students with and without disabilities. Education, we've done some outreach to superintendents, school principals, and advocates to discuss the program and educational resources that are available. We're currently meeting with school officials to determine their needs. Our goal is to be able to have 50 schools consistently registered with the program over the next 3 years. As part of the response to the recommendations from this Vision Zero Council Education Subcommittee and our proposed legislation, we're working on creating a bicycle and pedestrian safety working group to determine what the existing resources are and what the needs are in order to create access to bicycle and pedestrian safety education in all schools. We're actively working towards recommendations such as the Vision Zero School Program of Distinction. We're collaborating with other states on best practices in those areas. Encouragement, our first event was Walk, Bike, and Roll to School Day on May 3rd, and we had official participation through our national registration for 24 schools. The Connecticut DOT was able to attend events in Fairfield and Simsbury. Our registration link was available to all on our website, and participation in the event is important as one of the first steps to observations and data collection. Participated in the Connecticut DOT Bring Your Child to Work Day event, and we're currently attending other events to share information about the program. Another important aspect of both the Safe Routes to School programs and projects is evaluation. On the non-infrastructure side, a review of data is completed through technical assistance. The Safe Routes to School toolkit and walkability, bikeability checklists, as well as walk audits and Safe Routes to School plans for districts will be completed. The goal of having 15 school districts per year utilize the walk audits to create Safe Routes to School plans for their entire district. We are currently working on a story map to be able to inform the public about past projects and current events. Finally, evaluation is also important on the infrastructure side of the program. So this includes a review of lessons learned in the past to create a process for projects that includes the Safe Routes to School coordinator and team, documentation and annual reporting of progress, a review of performance measures on the national level with the Safe Routes to School partnership, projects in accordance with active transportation planning to include Complete Streets, ADA, and Vision Zero. When examining projects through the lens of the framework, our fifth E is enforcement. While this can be provided through non-infrastructure activities such as crossing guards, it also can be provided through programmatic safety countermeasures. We've been working closely with partners such as the T2 Center on these efforts, which include safety countermeasures in the vicinity of schools, education on the establishment of school zones, and dynamic speed feedback signs in school zones. Engineering is the sixth E, and through both as infrastructure improvements and built environment that enable routes to school to be safer and more accessible, as well as quick build projects. From 2006 to 2012, Safe Routes to School funding provided for 21 infrastructure projects. New opportunities with the program can provide for larger infrastructure projects as well, such as sidewalks, pathways, and other pedestrian and bicycle facilities as part of this program. We're also looking at quick build projects like crosswalks and raised crosswalks, rectangular rapid flashing beacons or RFBs, and bicycle parking facilities that are much needed. And so alignment with Vision Zero, the national resources that have been helpful support have been the Safe Routes Partnership, the National Safe Routes to School Clearinghouse that is staffed by the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center, as well as Vision Zero for youth programs. And some ideas for the council to consider would be to prioritize children as vulnerable road users and schools as key destinations. We were able to see how much of the state's covered by the area in the vicinity of schools. By prioritizing children and working with Vision Zero efforts, we work to eliminate all traffic deaths and serious injuries in most of the state. Increasing investments in Safe Routes to School, working on identifying funding sources, the coordinator and consultant on board to help with some of these efforts. Reducing speeding and speed limits around the schools. We're working on school zone identification, dynamic speed feedback sign projects in school zones, infrastructure and traffic calming efforts. Engaging the community groups in Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School by helping with assistance with outreach and identifying what the stakeholders. We'd be able to involvement from key agencies such as the agencies on the Vision Zero Council will help with this effort. Offering comprehensive bicycle and pedestrian safety education. As I mentioned, we have a working group that has started, and any members that from the Vision Zero Council with feedback and input is helpful. We like to be able to pursue unique approaches that will advance safety for kids and families. Ideas from the council and recommendations from the subcommittees are helpful with this measure, as well as working to develop that Vision Zero school program of distinction. And now I can address any questions, feedback, as well as invite you to make some connections between the Safe Routes to School program and the Vision Zero efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Really, truly impressive how much you've been able to pull together in just the few months you've been here. Really exciting to see where we can take this. And I think the fact, that our Vision Zero Council has State Department of Education, the Office of Early Childhood on it, is completely aligned with what you're working on. So I'll turn it over to council members if you have any questions, suggestions, or requests for her to potentially connect with some of your colleagues. Susan.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very, very well informing. I'm wondering if you are able to share your shapefile on the school mapping so that I might be able to use that. I also have access to crash data, and I'm curious about different types of injuries around those school segments, those school locations.
So yes, the mapping data that shows the vicinity of schools and the buffer zones. Yep, and we're working to develop a story map as well that will help to have even more comprehensive information.
So I would just like to have the shapefile that has the schools on it, or be directed to that resource.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. John?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for this presentation, Kristen. This was fantastic. I'm curious with the accessibility piece in the groups and organizations that you're working on, who is bringing the perspective from the disability community to your meetings and to your sessions and to your work?
So far, we've been able to partner with some of the school districts, been able to do some outreach with the administration at the schools to be able to get some more information. And our pedestrian and bicycle safety education working group is in its infancy, just really starting. So we would welcome some members to be able to help us with some of the different accessibility concerns. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, it'd be great if you can provide Kristen with contacts, who you think are best to loop into these working groups. Thank you. Any other questions? SDE is on. I don't see State Department of Ed on, but I know we'll have to. Eileen, early childhood.
Yes, thank you, Garrett. I popped it into the chat because I really wanted to record it on the record. I so appreciate that you've highlighted children as being a vulnerable population when using the roads. And so as I hear you describe this magnificent work that's going on with Safe Routes to School, I immediately think about the Safe Routes to Childcare because little people grow up into bigger people. So if there are ways that the Office of Early Childhood could support some of this work in terms of getting information out to parents at the earliest opportunity, I would be glad to participate in that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll be sure to share the presentation after the meeting. Kristen is a state employee, so she has a standard state employee email address, so all of us know how to find each other. But she'll be sure to be in touch with you, Susan, on that data and connect with you, John, and Eileen as well. So thank you, Kristen. Great job.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
And I guess I know there are people from the community on this tuning into this meeting as well. I'm sure Kristen would welcome the opportunity to hear from community members who are interested in their schools beginning to participate in this program too. So feel free to reach out to us at the DOT about that. So with that, the next agenda item is subcommittee updates. So I'll turn it over to you, Aaron, to lead us through that discussion with the subcommittee chairs.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, so as most of the folks who are, here today know, the council created 4 subcommittees last year, and those subcommittees were in 4 different areas or focused on 4 different areas of traffic safety. Those were engineering, enforcement, education, and equity. Thank you to all the folks who participated as part of those subcommittees on behalf of the council. Obviously, the hard work that went into making policy recommendations and informing the council as to what our different safety stakeholders thought was important is ultimately what made up that bill that's still in front of the legislature now. So that hard work was actionable, and we can see the results of it, and hopefully we all hope that passes. But ultimately, the work of the subcommittees has been good to date. The council asked the subcommittees at the last meeting to meet prior to this one and kind of review and summarize what they had done to date, and also start to consider priorities for the future. So with that, I'm going to go through each subcommittee and ask their co-chairs to give an update to the council. First up is the engineering subcommittee, and that's co-chaired by Natasha Fatu and Chuck Harlow. And I'll turn it over to you guys.
Good morning. My name is Natasha and I work at the DOT. I co-lead with Chuck Harlow, who works at Fuss and O'Neill. And we recently met at the beginning of May with our engineering subcommittee. We have about 30 to 35 members in our group. In attendance, we had about 20 people on that meeting call. Some of what we discussed was the legislative bills at that time. Some of what engineering subcommittee put forth in the Vision Zero bill was to require a complete streets plan. So we updated our members to let them know that that portion was removed from the bill. The clarification about conduct authority to acquire land from trails also came from the engineering subcommittee, and that portion was removed from the bills. However, the other two that came from engineering, and I recognize that there are other subcommittees that may have also advocated for some of these items here, was the adoption of the ICE policy and the automated speed enforcement, which we heard from Anne earlier, is still moving forward at this time. So we updated our members on this portion of legislation. Next slide, please. We next then talked about some of the penalties that engineering is in. So FHWA every year reviews our data for safety performance target assessments. We have 5 categories: number of fatalities, rate of fatalities, number of serious injuries, rate of serious injuries, and number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So FHWA reviewed the calendar year 2021. They do go back a few years to make sure that all of the information is captured, because it does take a little bit of time sometimes to ensure that the numbers are valid and the fatalities are accounted for. We did not meet any of our safety performance targets in the 5 categories for that year. We did meet or did better than our baseline in 3 of the categories: number of serious injuries, rate of serious injuries, and number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. But because we did not meet the 5, any of the 5, as a result, Connecticut has to come up with an HSIP implementation plan. And HSIP stands for Highway Safety Improvement Program. And it is required, and it's a funding obligation, a mechanism for a funding obligation towards safety projects. So Connecticut right now is in the process of coming up with a plan. The plan is due June 30th of this year. We work with a number of stakeholders, including COGS, the COGS around, and we put together the plan, which does need approval from FHWA. Next slide, please. In addition to the penalty of coming up with the plan, and I'd like to point out that we don't, and at DOT, we don't necessarily consider that implementation plan a penalty. I'd like to say that it's actually an opportunity for us to identify projects, both mainly in infrastructure, but there are educational and enforcement opportunities for us to allocate money specifically towards safety. So I don't think of it as a penalty. I think of it as focusing on the types of crashes we need to drive down and coming up with projects to help do so. But in addition to coming up with the plan, we also have to, we did trigger 3 special rules. And those special rules are high-risk rural roads. So we did not come down in the number of high-risk rural roads and crashes. In fact, they went up. So we have to obligate a certain amount of money towards projects to help reduce the number of crashes happening along rural roads. We also trigger the older driver and pedestrian penalty, which means we have to include strategies to address the older driver and pedestrian crashes in our strategic highway safety plan. We do, in our existing strategic highway safety plan, we do have older drivers as part of an emphasis area, and pedestrians are a standalone emphasis area in our strategic highway safety plan. So we are working with those groups, and if you'd like to be a part of an emphasis area, please reach out to me. But we are already incorporating projects, again, infrastructure, education, and enforcement in nature to focus on these. And then we also trigger the vulnerable road user safety penalty. And this, again, is an obligation of funding specifically to address vulnerable road user type projects. Next slide, please.
So we just wanted to go through what the recent statistics are for the last 3 years where we have full data. And as you can see here, there's almost 4,500 fatal and serious injury crashes, of which 832 of them were fatalities and 3,700 serious injuries. And looking at the crash data as part of that HSIP implementation plan, the majority of the crashes, the most serious numbers of crashes occur in 3 areas. It's in roadway departures, angles, and pedestrian crashes. And those also align with emphasis areas that are in the strategic highway safety plan. Next slide. So when we had our meeting on May 16th with our subcommittee, we went over some of the items of what's going on in the department now, and also where we want to move forward as a group. So some of these things are items that are existing projects the department is pursuing. We're also looking to how do we want to, where can our committee go to come up with either policies or legislation to move forward with safety. So the things that came up a lot was complete streets and quick builds. So the state of Connecticut was lucky to get a Complete Streets Academy grant where 3 cities were targeted, Bristol, Waterbury, and Middletown, for trying to find out quick builds to try to, to make it safer for pedestrians to walk around, or bicycles, for all of that to work in their towns where they can build them quickly, evaluate them, and either take them out if they didn't work or move forward with a project to make them permanently. So those are moving forward. Road diets were discussed. The department has been targeting roads where they think when they're paving them, if they can change the pavement markings to reduce the number of lanes, make them a little safer for mixed use of bicycles, pedestrians, and cars. The one thing we didn't really address very well in our first gathering of the subcommittee for last year was roadway departures, which is one of the higher numbers of crashes occurring. So that's something the department is targeting that right now with projects with existing high friction surface treatments, which increase friction, so cars maybe stay on the roads a little better. And they went through a program of installing signs on horizontal curve warning signs on all the state roads, and they're currently in design for doing it on municipal roadways, so they include that way. And then also we had a very heavy discussion on centerline rumble strips. There are it's about 120 towns that have accepted these as a potential to use. They are a very proven safety countermeasure to stop people from running off the road, but there's still a number of towns that are hesitant, I guess I'll put it, to install these things. So that's something that we're maybe can you go to the next slide? We want to discuss further. So as part of this, we are putting together, I'm going to lead a working group for roadway departures, which maybe also include how are we going to get centerline rumble strips more accepted in the community. And also, but the other, so that's one of the things we're moving forward to. The other was how are we going to progress our complete streets plan, because pedestrians, obviously they were targeted in some of the special rules. They are there's a high number of pedestrian crashes. We feel we got to come up with other ideas on how to target, to drive down to crashes with pedestrians, and what we can do. How can we progress a complete streets plan? I know it was removed from the legislation, but is there another way we can do around that, or something that internal to the DOT can focus on, maybe through a policy? So that's some of our ideas, and that's where we stand right now. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or not.
Thank you, Natasha and Chuck. So Aaron, do you want us to ask questions in between each one or save them for the end?
Let's do it. Let's do it in between each, just so that they're relevant to what we just heard about. I think we'll do that now.
So
I do see it. Oh, sorry.
Yep, go ahead, Natasha.
I see a question in the chat. It says, do we know if other states have struggled to meet their safety metrics? The answer to that is yes, but I do not know how many. So I don't know, what the percentages of the states have struggled with that. I have been reaching out to our neighbor states. They are in a very similar boat as us. We've been talking about how the numbers for the last year, especially last year, but even this year, are still trending in the wrong direction. There was one other piece to that question. How will the trends since 2021 impact Connecticut's HSIP and implementation plan going forward? I'm anticipating that we're going to be doing an implementation plan for the next couple of years. And the impact would be just focusing on the reviewing. We do review and analyze the data every year. So accounting for that, working with additional stakeholders to help come up with the different ideas. It's not just engineering a solution. It needs to be a collaboration of all of the groups here. So we definitely are a way to get involved. I'm going to put a plug in for the strategic highway safety plan is that we do have emphasis areas that are looking for people of all disciplines to participate, because we do want to hear from education, emergency services, people that are on the roads using this. What do they see and do they have ideas? Because we're just looking for more ideas to help implement to reduce the number of crashes on our roadways. This year is not trending in the correct direction.
Great, thank you. So any questions from any council members on the engineering side? I guess one of my questions would be if the subcommittee, given it is a diverse group of individuals, if you have identified any best practices from other states when it comes to complete streets implementation, or maybe that's something we could talk about for investigation over the course of this year. Given that piece was taken out of the bill, just wondering what other states have done to try and encourage municipal adoption of that. I know the federal government's doing their part through the Safe Streets for All program. I'm encouraging adoption of plans. So just wanted to, put it to you two as the chairs to see if you've looked at that.
So I think Massachusetts has a very robust complete streets program where if you want to get funding, you need to have a plan in place. In fact, I think they very much encourage that. I don't know all the details of it, but I know when we were looking at that as part of the HSIP implementation plan review, that was something we thought was a good model. And also as part of when we were looking at this subcommittee last year, that was also something we say, well, our neighbors are doing it. Why, we should maybe, it seems to be working for them. Maybe that's something we want to consider.
Okay, great. Aaron, I'll turn it back to you to keep.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Natasha and Chuck, and I'll piggyback off of Natasha's SHSP plug. I co-lead the pedestrian safety emphasis area for the SHSP. And I think some of our partners, both from the council and the subcommittees, might be hearing from me soon to try to build participation as part of our emphasis area. So I'll just put that out there. Next up, we're going to hear from the enforcement subcommittee. We have a new co-chair in Sergeant John Akampora and Terry Thompson from CROG. I'll turn it over to you.
Mark, you going to take it or you want me to take it?
Go ahead, Terry. You work so hard on it, please, by all means.
Good morning, everybody. We worked very hard in the enforcement subcommittee, and Natasha expressed some of that, where we were working on our four real big ones were the motorcycle helmet law, the open container law, BAC, and the automated enforcement, plus a fatal collision team. Unfortunately, everything but the automated enforcement made it into the bill. We're waiting to see exactly what will happen with that. There was an amendment on that. Our intent is to re-meet with the stakeholders. We had one brief meeting just to recap and going forward. So we're going to be setting up a meeting for that. And we need to have an in-depth discussion with the stakeholders as to how we can move forward. We really want to push that these sections of the bill that were removed, we're going to push that they be included again in the next legislation. And we also will hope to speak to legislatures and some of those to find out exactly what the cons were on some of these, and so that we can get a better understanding and see if we can come up with some win-win solutions so that we can get these bills passed. And also look at some more innovative practices that maybe we can adopt and look at, like you had mentioned, Commissioner, looking at other states that have definitely been able to make these things happen. We're going to have to look at the automated enforcement carefully. There was some changes made to that. There's a lot of burden on the municipalities, as well as I think the Department of Transportation, and exactly how that's going to work. And as a Capital Region Council of Government traffic incident management person, I'm also talking to our executive director and other cogs as how we can maybe assist municipalities in developing these plans and moving forward with the automated enforcement. So that's it from us for now.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you for all the hard work to date on this. You know, one thing I probably should have prefaced is, you know, if any of the subcommittees would like myself and Ann to come in and meet with you all to talk about what we heard from the legislators through this process on the Vision Zero Council bill, why they may have jettisoned certain things. I mean, we'll know more after this week, next couple of days, but we'd be happy to come into one of your upcoming meetings of the subcommittee. I think, you know, a lot of what you all have included in your recommendations, you know, were something that I've heard from my colleagues and other state DOTs. Delaware is actually doing a similar push this year. I met with the Secretary of DelDOT. She has a major safety bill where she has provisions related to open containers, motorcycle helmets, speed cameras, and so they're facing a lot of the same problems we are. And it's interesting how aligned our legislative priorities were this year. So I'm happy to continue those conversations with you, and then continue to work with the subcommittee throughout the course of the next year. So thank you again for all that hard work. Any questions from any other council members? Okay, thank you.
Okay, if not, next up is our Education Subcommittee. That's chaired by Ernie Patothi and Sean Formica from DMV and Amy Watkins from Connecticut Children's.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So our subcommittee met on Monday, May 22nd. And for our agenda, we welcomed some new members. We gave the subcommittee members an update on where the legislation stood as far as we knew at the time. We asked members to give project updates, and we discussed next steps with the help of Aaron Swanson. So thank you. Our newest member of the subcommittee is Kristen Levesque, who we heard from earlier today from Safe Routes to Schools. We're super excited about the work that she's doing. It's directly related to education as far as advancing the Vision Zero priorities. So we're keeping a close eye on that and cooperating and encouraging that work as much as we possibly can. So we did receive some updates from subcommittee members. Eric Jackson from UConn briefed the committee on the University Transportation Center proposal that was led by UMass and funded by USDOT. The goal with this is to improve equity and safety with respect to transportation, and UConn will receive $750,000 a year to conduct research. Anna Dorogazi from AARP told us they were awarded a technical assistance grant to work on Smart Growth America, on education related to Complete Streets planning. And as hopefully everybody knows, Complete Streets is an approach to planning, designing, building, and operating streets that enables safe access for all users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, transit riders of all ages and abilities. As previously mentioned, Waterbury, Middletown, and New Britain were won grants related to Complete Streets. The Department of Motor Vehicles completed its 14th annual Teen Safe Driving Video Contest for Connecticut high school students. They received over 100 short PSA videos from students to promote the state's teen driving laws and support a safe driving message through peer-to-peer communication. The winning schools were Thomaston, Wilton, Arts at the Capitol Theater in Willimantic, and Hall High School in West Hartford. The winning schools and teens receive cash awards from contest co-sponsor Travelers Insurance. Finally, Alex Latke from AAA discussed his organization's desire to focus on marijuana and driving education to businesses, particularly ones that have fleet drivers. As a final thought, we were thinking about next steps. The subcommittee is prepared to support projects spelled out in the related to education in the Vision Zero legislation, regardless of if all of those parts of the bill become law. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I'll start with just a couple questions. One is, this is more for DMV, but the teen ads, could you share those with the council members after this meeting? Would love to see the winning ads. And then DMV has been helpful to us. You're including some of our videos on your in-branch TV screens, some of our safety videos that we air on TV and on the internet. So would love to maybe post some of the winning teen ads on we have 2 monitors here in our lobby in DOT, not as heavily trafficked as a DMV branch, but still would love to get them into the loop. So thank you for sharing that. And then the UConn University Transportation Center piece is an important thing. Maybe we will post something on the Vision Zero Council website, information about that, because I don't think, I know there was a press release about that from the federal government, but we should probably include more information about what that is going to be, since its focus is going to be on safety issues. So thank you for the reminder there. Any other questions from council members? Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have anything else, our final subcommittee update is from Equity. We also have a new Equity Subcommittee co-chair. That's Catherine Hedberg from DOT and Alex Latke from AAA Northeast.
Thanks, Aaron. I'll kick it off and then I'll pass it over to Katie. We had a meeting a few weeks ago. It was, I think, pretty productive, and similar to the other groups, folks were sharing what they were working on, and I think, Garrett, I think we'll definitely take you up on the offer to have you and Ed come. I think there was a great deal of interest, particularly in the automated enforcement aspects related to equity, and we actually met, I think the week prior to the House amendment coming out that included a lot of those equity related provisions, but I think there are a couple of different paths we'll probably take as the equity committee or the equity subcommittee, and one is kind of taking an equity lens to all the other proposals that are coming from the other subcommittees or that exist elsewhere. Automated enforcement, I think, being an excellent example. BAC going down to 0.05, I think that's another area, but really just kind of taking a look at everything that all the committees are recommending and making sure that those are done in equitable ways. And I think we'll have a good sense of direction in 48 hours after the legislative session ends. And then I think the other path we'll take is how can we do things proactively that are related both to safety and equity. And I was excited to hear about program that I think Juliet at DOT had mentioned related to a reentry program and safe driving education in Waterbury and a few other cities. So more initiatives like that. I think we'd like to work together on those and, make recommendations and bring folks to the table who can really make those efforts. And I'll pass it over to Katie to share her thoughts.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Hedberg. I'm the Americans with Disabilities Act coordinating engineer at DOT. I wanted to just say I'm very excited to be joining the council. Our group is organizing a ADA 33rd celebration event in Meriden at the Town Green with their amphitheater on July 26th to mark the 33rd signing. So if you're interested in that, registration is going to be opening soon for it. But I'm really looking forward to getting involved and working with you all. And that event's with the T2 Center, WTS Connecticut, ITE. So there's a bunch of groups that are getting involved with that.
Great. Katie, if you get that flyer or information to Aaron, we can send it out to the Vision Zero Council listserv as well.
Perfect, thanks.
Any questions for the equity subcommittee? I know we're going to wrap up discussion with the subcommittee to talk about potential direction moving forward for the various subcommittees, but any questions specifically for equity before we move on to that next step? So this is an opportunity for us as council members to have a discussion with our subcommittee chairs about, general where we, think they may want to focus attention over 2023 into early 2024. So I can start with some of my thoughts and then I'll let the other council members jump in as well. So last week, I was in Washington, D.C. for less than 24 hours for the USDOT held a summit for entities that signed on as partners to the National Roadway Safety Strategy. So myself and the engineering administrator for USDOT, Mark Carlino, went down, and it was a great opportunity to get into some breakout sessions with USDOT leadership about various issues. So one issue that continued to come up in multiple discussions was the issue of data. And the key question that they were putting to us is, what data don't we have? What data is not really adequate? And what can we as partners in safety be doing to improve data collection, improve data utilization, and what data are we looking for that we don't currently have? And that's something that I've long been focused on before I came to USDOT, or before I came to CONDOT, was on data integration, data linkage, to improving the data hygiene can help us make better decisions of where we need to make investments. For instance, one thing that we previously never used to have at CONDOT was race and ethnicity data of fatals, of traffic, of victims of crashes. So we now have a partnership with DPH where we get that data. UConn helps us link that data. So we're able to know now that in 2021, 45% of the individuals killed on our roads were Black and Hispanic individuals. That's far outstrips the makeup of Connecticut for race and ethnicity data. So that helps us peel back a layer to show, when the equity committee, right, it's showing us the disproportionate impact of traffic, crashes on, Black and Hispanic individuals in Connecticut. So I guess one charge I would put to each of the subcommittees is if you can have discussions internally. Something I'd really be interested in is, where you see the weak points in data. Where can we as a state do a better job? What tools are necessary to improve that? And that's something I think that, have the subcommittees come to us. That's something that if we need to do something legislatively, if we need to do something with resources. I know our one thing that I constantly worry about is the lack of resources at the state lab to necessarily test and know what's in everyone's system. We know individuals are drunk due to their ability to test for that. We have a difficult time. Sometimes we don't have all the data. So what else is in their system? It's called a polyuse, right? If they are drunk and high on fentanyl or opioids or something else in their system or cannabis, which the presence doesn't necessarily indicate impairment, but it gives us a better picture of what's happening on the roads and can help law enforcement partners, mental health and addiction services get a better picture of what's happening. So that's the type of example of, I think data hits on every single subcommittee. So would love to have our subcommittees do a little bit discussion internally with your subject matter experts as to where you think there's some weak points in our data sets and what we can be doing better to improve data, and also how we can better utilize the data we do have. Because sometimes I've found that we don't even know the data sets we do have access to. And it's just a matter of connecting those dots. So that's, I think, one piece that I would put to the subcommittees. And the other piece is, we'll know better after this week what happens with the legislation. But reassessing, again, happy to come in and meet with your subcommittees, but I think reassessing what passed, what didn't pass, what can we do as agencies for internal policy changes that may not require legislation, and then what else should we look at next year for legislation. I think, you know, there's always things we can be doing internally as agencies, as partners in safety. So I think there's two different paths there. So maybe breaking that out as to what can our state partners be doing internally to improve, to make some changes in the march towards zero. And then what else do we need to go back to the legislature next year on? So I think those are my two high points based on my discussions in DC that I'd love to put to the subcommittees. I don't know if the chairs have any thoughts, immediate reactions to that, or if any of my council members disagree or have other things they want to add on to that. Just open it up to any of you to jump in.
Garrett, this is Susan, your associate DPH. I love the idea of data. I think that if you were to speak with Eric Jackson, you would understand that as we begin to link data and share data, we're finding that the quality of our different data sources comes into play. It's a whole new perspective that we're seeing now because we haven't been able to match this. And I do agree. It's kind of difficult, I think, as we all work in our different compartments to recognize the importance of linking. I know for CDC, we have there's a linking initiative that is sort of, you know, cradle to grave, full circle. We need more support with that. We still don't have linking with a lot of the stakeholders like DMV. Another situation I think that goes along with the data linking is that we need to facilitate the sharing of more personal information. We're having a very, very difficult time trying to match police records with EMT, with emergency medical service records, with hospital discharge and mortality records, because multiple people get hurt at the same time. And if we don't have their names and if we don't have personally identifying information, then we can't distinguish one individual from another. And that's been very much of a challenge as well. And there just seems to be a need to just push data sharing as in collaboratively in a much broader perspective, and really support that cradle to grave, really support the crash data repository and the needing of very specific information. The other piece that I'd like to put out for everybody is that what we're realizing, a lot of information comes from the police report at the actual crash, and that the officer who's completing that police report doesn't necessarily have focus on some of the data elements that are so crucial. And so if we could be doing these linkings and then actually retroactively pull in data that's already been established in somebody else's field, so that we don't have to put so much of a burden on the officer at the scene. Because we heard in the TRCC meeting last week, a couple weeks ago, that there's chaos at these crashes when people are literally losing their lives, and there's helicopters coming down, and for the officer to be able to capture as much information in that original police report, it's difficult. So can we, by linking, actually capture and populate data so that it doesn't rely so much on the officer? So there's these kinds of things to think about as we move forward. The thumbs up on data quality, data access, data sharing as a priority for 2023, 2024.
Thanks, Susan. And Susan and I did not collaborate ahead of time on the issue of data. I just know I have a believer and a practitioner at DPH. So John?
Thanks, Commissioner. With respect to data collection, and I preface this by saying, I know it is a tremendous challenge to collect data on disability, in large part because people have to self-identify. But to the degree that we can collect that data or research how other states might be doing it, best practices, et cetera, I strongly encourage us to do that, because I think we can learn a lot from that in terms of ways we can ways we can prevent further injury and harm and death to that community. It's every bit as vulnerable as children are, with respect to vulnerable communities.
That's a great point. So we'll put that to the subcommittees. I think, if maybe the subcommittees, especially equity, maybe can look and see what's being done in other states on collecting that data on the disability community. Because you're right. I mean, it's an issue that we really need to get a handle on. We do get data on age. So that covers the aging population that has mobility impairments due to aging in some cases, but we don't have other disabilities necessarily captured. So I'd love to know what other states are doing in that field so we can better, address those vulnerable users of our system too.
And I could just add to that very quickly, Commissioner, not just on the pedestrian side, but we have drivers with disabilities as well. So on either side, that data is critical to potentially determining causes for things.
Great point. Council members, any other topical areas or direction that you'd like the subcommittees to look at over the next 6 months or so, and going into the end of the year work period? I think one thing there may be a question about is like how often. I think it would be helpful definitely for each subcommittee to meet at least once more before the next quarterly Vision Zero Council meeting. So have one in between each. I know it's going to be summertime. It might be difficult to coordinate, but in the era of Zoom, hopefully you can have a quorum partnership there on your subcommittee meetings. I think our next meeting is we'll talk about that, but at least one more time there in that space, and then similarly in between. So once or twice more in between to help make some progress. I know a lot of work is done off those meetings too by the volunteers who are giving up their time to work on these issues. So I appreciate that and understand this is outside the scope of your normal work activities. So thank you for that.
Garrett?
Yeah, sorry,
Um,
Jackie.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Commissioner, for that. And I agree with you about data. I also agree that data sharing would be a great goal for us. I would take more of a broad approach to this. I think we consistently kind of try to stay in our respective lanes and piggyback off of ideas we're seeing from other states. And I would say let's have the subcommittees throw that out the window and start with a dream world premise, right? I was in a meeting just last week and heard from parents of 17 and 18-year-olds that were saying that their children had no desire to get a license and that they were perfectly happy Ubering and taking lifts around instead. Well, maybe, you know, that's an approach that we take, is to move away from individual drivers and instead focus on more of a ride sharing environment. I don't know, but just kind of throw out the practicalities and start with the world that you would love to see. And then maybe we can pick out small steps to get to those worlds. And I don't know, that helps me as a thinker, and maybe it would be a fruitful discussion for subcommittees to have and then bring back to the council to say, okay, well, that's a great dream world. How do we take those small steps to approach that place?
I think that's a great point. You know, it's something Governor Lamont says to me all the time, is like, I'll go in with my facts and I'll talk to him about certain projects and plans. He's like, okay, but what's the vision? What would your vision be for, in a perfect world, for what we could achieve here? So I think that's a great point, is to step back and reassess, where do we want to be, which is 0, but what does that world look like in order to get us there, and what could be changed to get there? And it can be well outside of you know, the scope that we work in today, right? But that helps a lot of us get into our, this is the world we work in today, like at the DOT, this is what we do. I don't think like someone who works in the early childhood arena, but having that cross-pollination is the whole point of this council. So that's a great point. I think step back and look at a higher level.
Yeah, and to recognize the interplay, right? No, you don't focus on early childhood, but you recognize that probably the busiest times on our roads are the times when people are commuting and trying to get their child dropped off at that daycare or at the drop off for the school. And so what do we do around that time? Or do we throw the time out the window altogether, right? And do we instead start daycares at 5 a.m. To alleviate, whatever the case may be? Just kind of think outside, way outside the box, even if to the ridiculous, and see what we can make work.
Like that. Anything else from council members? So subcommittee chairs, you're given the mission to be creative and think outside the box, and encourage it.
I'd also just like to note, I popped a link to P20 Win into the chat for this meeting. It's an entity that can help with data triangulation and linkages across agencies. So
great.
Check that out.
Thank you. Okay. Great. Well, I think that wraps up the subcommittee discussion. Appreciate all you chairs joining us today. We'll be in touch in the next few weeks. As you get your next meeting scheduled, we can talk about whether you want Anne or myself to parachute in to give a brief update on the legislative session and what we heard in those discussions. You know, still getting more feedback over the next 2 days, but we'll be in a better place to have those discussions after this week. So. Okay, Aaron.
Thank you. So just before we move on to public comment, Just a reminder that our next meetings are scheduled. The next one is September 19th. Obviously, like Garrett just alluded to, we'll know a lot more in terms of legislation and policy and where we're going to go next after the next couple of days. And I'd encourage anybody who's either at this meeting or if you want to share with your colleagues at your respective agencies or organizations, we're always looking for potential topics of discussion for upcoming meetings. So if there's something that we're not talking about that you'd like to hear about, please just reach out to me and we can try to put something together at the coming meetings. And with that, we can move on to public comment. Again, for anyone who wants to make a comment, we will prioritize raised hands and in-person comments prior to those typed into the question and answer box, but we will get all of those answered as well. Like I said before, due to the FOIA laws, please refrain from using the chat feature for this portion of the meeting. Not seeing anything yet, but we can give it a minute or two. I'm not seeing any questions yet. We can just give it one more minute. And I'll say, even if nobody has any questions right now, you know, the Connecticut Vision Zero email inbox is always open, and you know, we respond to lots of questions and inquiries there as well.
And Aaron, I'll add that once legislative session ends, we'll be sure to send an update to everyone as to what transpires over the next couple of days.
Yep. I think we have an incoming question about safe routes to school. Sarah Roy asked, Kristen mentioned funding for non-infrastructure. Would bike bus initiatives possibly be eligible for funding?
So Sarah, I think Kristen dropped off, but we will connect you directly with Kristen, and she can answer that question for you. I know the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is pretty broad with respect to what can be funded. So we'll make sure to connect the two of you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything else. Yep.
Okay, so seeing nothing else, we'll move. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
From Jackie, second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you spending time with us this morning. Hope you enjoy watching CTN the next couple of days. Have a great week.
Thank you.